You are 12 years old. Your father has just handed you to God. This is how he says it, to God, as if God's address is the stone building at the end of the cart track, as if God's waiting room smells of tallow and wet wool, as if God himself will be collecting you at the gate. He will not. The abbess will. Her name is Hildegund. She has done this 43 times. Your father pays the entry fee, the dowry for Christ, the church calls it, and walks back down the road. He does not look behind him. You watch until he is smaller than a thumb, and then smaller than nothing. This is not a punishment. You are not the bad daughter. You are simply the third daughter, and 3 daughters cannot all be married, and the church offers the cleanest solution. God takes you. The family keeps the inheritance. Everyone is saved. Welcome to your new life as a nun in a medieval convent. The vows are poverty, chastity, and obedience. The first you already have. The third will be negotiated. The second is where things get interesting. Part 1. A girl delivered to stone walls. The cart stops at the gate before lauds, which is the hour before dawn when the bells ring and everyone inside must wake and pray whether they are ready or not. You are not ready. The gate opens. The porteress, Sister Gertrude, is a woman of perhaps 50, with forearms like a miller, and the stillest eyes you have ever seen on a living creature. She looks at you, the way she has looked at every child who arrived at this gate, with neither warmth nor cruelty, only the patience of someone who has learned that children become something else over time, and it is not worth investing in the arrival. She takes your bundle. She takes your name. She gives you a new one. You are no longer the name your mother called you in the morning, the name your brothers used to tease you, the name your father signed into the entry record. You are now sister, and then a name chosen for a saint. You have no preference in the matter. The abbess chose it before you arrived. The oblate mistress, Sister Richardis, takes you to the dormitory. It is a long stone room with wooden sleeping frames arranged in rows. A single candle burns in a holder near the door. The other oblates, the girls who were delivered before you, are already stirring. They range from 9 to 15. One of them is a girl with dark eyes and a crooked front tooth who introduces herself in a whisper so practiced it barely stirs the air. Her name is Mechthild. She was delivered 4 months ago. She has already learned which boards in the dormitory floor squeak and which can be trusted. She hands you a piece of bread she has saved from Vespers. You eat it. This is the first kindness in the new world, and it will not be the last. The life of an oblate, a child given to the convent before taking vows, runs on its own particular logic. You are not yet a novice. You are not yet a nun. You are a girl in training, and the training covers everything: how to walk in procession, how to read Latin, how to hold a candle, how to pray the 7 canonical hours that divide the day like cuts in stone, lauds, prime, terce, sexton, vespers, compline, 7 offices, 7 interruptions, every day, every year. The days are long. The nights are cold. The bread is adequate. The wine at the altar is thin enough to see through. You learn the psalms. You learn the liturgy. You learn to write in the scriptorium, which is the warm room where manuscripts are copied and the ink freezes in winter even there. You learn which sisters are kind and which are watching, and which are both at the same time. You learn Mechthild's laugh, which she has learned to produce in complete silence, a whole body shaking with no sound at all, achieved through years of practice in rooms where making noise at the wrong moment means kneeling on stone until the blood stops. You do not yet have a word for what you feel when she laughs. You learn it later. Part 2. The shape of an enclosed life. At 15 you take the veil. The ceremony is elaborate. You wear white. There is a ring. The language of the ceremony borrows from a wedding because the church has decided that you are marrying Christ, which solves several theological problems and creates several personal ones. The abbess cuts your hair. This is not metaphorical. She cuts it practically to the scalp with shears that are cold and efficient. A novice collects the hair from the floor. You do not know what happens to it. You are now bound. You will not leave these walls without permission. You will not receive visitors without a witness. You will not send letters without the abbess reading them first. You will not own anything. You will not choose your tasks. You will wake when the bells say, eat what the refectory provides, pray when the office requires, sleep when the great silence begins. This is the theory. The reality is more textured. The convent contains somewhere between 20 and 60 women depending on the house. A small rural priory might hold a dozen. A well-endowed abbey in a prosperous diocese might hold more. They range in age from oblates still learning their letters to elderly sisters who have outlived every family member who delivered them. They come from noble families and merchant families and the families of minor knights. A few come from nowhere anyone admits to discussing. They live in extreme proximity. They sleep in the same room. They eat at the same table. They pray in the same choir stall. They work in the garden, the kitchen, the scriptorium, the infirmary. They care for each other through illness. They wash each other's bodies when the fevers come. They sit with each other through the night when dying takes longer than expected. No arrangement of this kind, this density of women living in permanent close quarters across decades, remains purely institutional. The Church knows this. The Church has always known this. The rule of Saint Benedict, which governs many communities, commands that sisters not pair off with particular friends. The language is careful. It speaks of singular friendships, peculiares amicitia, as a disruption to the community, a fracturing of the collective bond of charity. Sisters are to love all their sisters equally, which is the same thing as commanding the tide to come in at the same height on every shore. The tide does not comply. You and Mechtilde work together in the scriptorium. She copies the plain text. You illuminate borders of vine leaves and small creatures, the occasional tiny face hidden in an initial that the next century of scholars will find and photograph and write careful papers about. You sit at adjacent desks. In winter, when the cold is bad enough, you sit close enough to share warmth. This is practical. This is sanctioned. The cold is real, and the candles are few and the work must continue. The rule says nothing specific about cold. Part 3. Letters the abbess did not read. Surviving letters from medieval convents, texts that slipped past abbesses or were never meant to slip at all, describe relationships between women in language that should perhaps be explained away, but is not quite. My soul melts when I am not near you. A phrase in one letter. The Latin is unambiguous. The writer is a nun. The recipient is her friend in another convent. The letter was kept. Someone kept it, perhaps the recipient, perhaps someone who found it after both women were dead and lacked the heart to burn it. There is language in these letters borrowed from Scripture, from the Song of Solomon especially, which is the book of the Bible that describes love between bodies, and which the Church chose to interpret as an allegory for the soul's love of God. The nuns use this language and direct it at each other. Whether this is allegory, or whether the allegory is a shell for something else, is a question the letters leave open on purpose. You learn this language in the scriptorium. You learn it by copying it. You learn it by reading it. You learn it by watching Mechtilde's hands on the vellum, the careful control of the quill, the slight frown she makes when the ink runs wrong. The friendship that grows in these conditions is not simple and not quick. It takes years. It takes the particular grammar of a life lived in absolute proximity in shared liturgy, in the specific weight of a hand passed to yours during a night office, when the cold and the darkness and the stone make the hour feel like the world has stopped. You share books. This is the most intimate thing available to you, because books are rare, and lending is trust made physical. You share interpretations. Long, whispered conversations in the cloister walk after Compline, which is a technical violation of the Great Silence and which you both know and neither mentions. You learn her history. She learns yours. You learn the shape of her grief. Her mother died when she was 3, her father remarried badly, the convent was the kindest offer on the table, and she learns yours. What the Church calls peculiares amicitia and fears is this. The possibility that 2 women inside a total institution, stripped of every other attachment, will form a bond, but that the institution cannot supervise or quantify or redirect. What you call it is simpler and harder. Because the vow of chastity is not theoretical, it is administered. Confessions are weekly. The confessor is a priest who comes from the associated monastery and who is neither blind nor ignorant. The language of the confessional is specific. The priest asks specific questions. What you confess depends on what you believe to be a sin. This is the question medieval theology kept turning over and never fully resolved. Whether love between women, without the particular acts the Church categorizes most harshly, is a sin at all, or whether it is the sin's neighbor, or whether it is a temptation or a distraction, or simply the natural consequence of sealing 60 women in a stone building for 50 years and asking them not to need each other. Different confessors answer differently. Some penitentials, the guidebooks for confessors, name acts between women explicitly and assign penances. Others do not. The silence in the guidebook is its own kind of statement. You navigate this silence. Part 4. What the rule cannot reach. The convent has a garden. Every convent has a garden. Medicinal herbs, kitchen vegetables, sometimes an orchard. The garden is enclosed. This is the point. The enclosed garden is a symbol in medieval religious art, lifted from the Song of Solomon, the hortus conclusus, the sealed garden, representing the Virgin's inviolable body. The irony is that the garden is also the place with the least supervision. You work in the garden with Mechthild on the afternoons assigned to manual labor. The sister who is supposed to oversee this work is Sister Adela, who is 81 years old and falls asleep in the afternoon reliably and without apology. This is not a secret. You know what happens in convent gardens from the records that survive, the occasional visitation report when a bishop makes his rounds and finds things not quite as the rule requires. Bishops complain about nuns who sit too close, who touch too often, who leave the dormitory after compline, who are found in each other's cells. The complaints are testy and procedural. The penances assigned are light, more fasting, more prayer, public prostration before the community. Serious cases involving acts the penitentials name, could bring expulsion. Most cases are not serious cases. Most cases are handled quietly because the bishop does not want the scandal, the abbess does not want the disruption, and the sisters involved are almost certainly not going anywhere. Where would they go? They have no money. They have no home to return to. Their families delivered them here and have not left a return address. The convent is not a prison in the legal sense, and it is also, functionally, the only world available. This is the architecture of the situation. The institution that contains you is also the institution that creates the conditions in which you find Mechthild. And Mechthild finds you. And the two things cannot be separated because you are the same thing. The Church made this world. In this world, you found this. Your body is not your own, officially. It was given to God. God, via his administrative apparatus on earth, has very specific opinions about what bodies may do and with whom. And yet the garden exists. The hours between Vespers and Compline exist. The scriptorium in winter, two bodies sharing warmth over shared work, exists. The rule cannot reach everywhere. The rule was written by men who were not there. Part 5. The women who left records and the women who did not. Some nuns wrote, "This is the unusual thing. The thing that makes the medieval convent, for all its enclosure and surveillance and theological machinery, one of the few spaces in the medieval world where women had sustained access to Latin literacy and a reason to use it. Hildegard of Bingen composed music, wrote theology, wrote natural history, wrote medicine, wrote letters to popes and emperors in a voice that was assured and not apologetic. Her community of women at Rupertsberg was her construction. The language she used about her companion Richardus, her secretary, her beloved, was the language of intense particular attachment, and when Richardus was transferred to another house against both their wishes, Hildegard's letters about it are not the letters of an administrator losing a useful colleague. This is one name. There are others. Women in German, French, Italian, Low-Country convents who wrote in ways that do not resolve neatly into allegory. Women whose communities sustain practices, particular friendships, long partnerships, shared cells, that the visitation records note with irritation and the literature of mysticism records with inadvertent warmth. Most nuns did not write. Most nuns are not in the record. Mechthild is not in the record. You are not in the record. You exist in the aggregate. In the visitation complaint that says, several sisters were found in configurations the rule does not sanction. In the penitential, that takes the trouble to describe acts between women and assign penances, in the absence of the letters that were not kept, in the garden where the old sister slept in the afternoon and no one wrote anything down. This is how most lives work. By the time you are in your 30s, the convent is what you have built a life inside. You know every stone. You know which corner of the cloister catches the afternoon light in winter. You know the smell of the infirmary after a fever breaks. You have sat with 3 sisters through their dying and held the hand of one oblate who arrived at 12 and was dead at 17 from something that moved through the lungs. You have prayed the offices so many times that the Latin lives in your body independently of thought. It surfaces when you're tired, when you're frightened, when you're half asleep. Deus in adiutorium meum intend God, come to my assistance. Mechtilde is 41. She has the same crooked tooth. She makes the same silent laugh that shakes her whole body without a sound. She sits 2 desks away in the scriptorium because the community has grown and the desks have been rearranged, and Sister Adela has been replaced by a younger and more attentive supervisor. The distance is 3 feet. You have lived inside a much larger distance before. Part 6, How the Garden Closes. You will not leave this place in any direction except one. Medieval nuns who lived past their 40s often lived long. The convent diet was consistent. The life was sedentary by some measures, extremely physical by others. The cold was constant and the heating poor, but the care in illness was better inside these walls than outside them in most circumstances. You age inside the community you have made. Oblates arrive, who are young enough to be your daughters. You teach them Latin. You teach them the songs. You watch which ones find each other in the way you found Mechtilde, and you do not say anything because you do not need to. You pass on what you know in the way that knowledge in total institutions always passes. Not in writing, not in declarations, but in practice, in proximity, in the specific silent grammar of a life shared in stone rooms with bells and prayers and the long, unwritten hours between them. The church will call you a bride of Christ. The church is not wrong, exactly. You are inside the church's house, in the church's clothes, speaking the church's language every hour of every day. But the church did not build you. It inherited you. You arrived at 12 with a crooked-toothed girl who saved you a piece of bread. And whatever it was that happened between then and now, the church's categories were not made to hold it, and the church's records were not designed to keep it. What is left is what was always there: the garden, the bells, the cold desk in the scriptorium, the body next to yours in the dark of a December office, and the Latin words that have lived in your mouth for 30 years and will live there until the last bell you hear. Deus in adiutorium intend. They took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and they kept most of them, most of the time. History is fastidious about the ones who fell short. Bishops wrote detailed complaints. Confessors assigned careful penances. Councils issued regulations about singular friendships, as if the problem were a filing error, and the solution were a better form. But the women who lived inside those walls for 50, 60 years, the women who shared dormitories and gardens and scriptorium desks and the small hours before dawn when the cold was bad and the candle was down to a stub, those women understood something the visiting bishop on his annual inspection did not. You cannot enclose a life in stone and expect that life to remain only institutional. The institution makes the enclosure. The women make the life. The letters that survived say, "My soul melts when I am not near you." The letters that did not survive said other things we will not know. Visitation records noted the irregularities. The irregularities continued. They built a world out of stone and bells and Latin. What grew inside it, they did not plan for.